Utilities national outings down in southern Illinois, as a matter of fact. So that was a while back. Other members of the Prairie Group are Stuart Levy, who's right over there, and he's our chair, and Lois Kane at the back. And we will be handing out cards, so I'll tell you about that in a minute. We're going to ask that people hold their questions until after everyone has had a chance to speak. We hope to be out of here by 7:30. So we're going to have these cards that I will pass out. And if you write your questions down on that card, we'll gather them at the end and have questions and answers at the end. So we have such a big panel here, we thought we'd better have some sort of organized way of doing this. But Chris Stohr, we are so pleased to have him. Chris Stohr will be our moderator, and he will be showing a few slides to get us started. Chris is chair of the Champaign County Carbon Sequestration Activities Task Force. So you can't ask for any higher credentials than that to learn about the aquifer. He also served on the county board, and he's retired from the Geological Survey and currently on the advisory board of the Mahomet Aquifer. And he gave me a card with a few more of the credentials that he has. If I can get it out of here. Okay. He is also on the Illinois Board of Licensing Professional Geologists. So I would suggest you give a hand to Chris Stohr.
Thank you. I want to thank the Sierra Club for organizing this public forum, and also for the panelists, some of whom have come from some distance to come here and be with us tonight. And these are all experts in their particular field. I guess we'll start by passing the mic from stage right. And Mr. Ted Kratschmer, would you care to tell us a little about yourself?
Yep. Thanks. My name is Ted Kratschmer. I work for American Water Company. My position is Source Water Protection Manager, and I cover the states of Illinois and Iowa and all our utilities. So I'm focused on protecting the source of what's our number one ingredient for clean water is our source water. So I'm from the St. Louis area. Surface waters are my home waters. The Mississippi River and Illinois River are my home waters. But happy to be here working on Mahomet Aquifer. This is actually, for water utilities across the nation, this is Source Water Protection Week. So we've been out in the community across the state talking about source water protection and all its facets. So happy to be here. This is right in line with what we're doing.
Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Jenna Shelton. I am the brand new director of the Illinois State Water Survey. I started about 3 months ago. I'm here filling in for the Illinois State Geological Survey. They're actually holding a carbon capture and storage workshop today, tomorrow, and Friday. So they unfortunately could not be here and they asked me, so I apologize that you're stuck with me and not the actual experts. My background is in impacts of oil and gas production on water quality, and I have a Ph.D. in environmental engineering science, a master's in hydrology and water resources, and I got my bachelor's degree here in Champaign, Urbana in geology. I came from the USGS where I focused on carbon sequestration, water quality, and geologic mapping, and that kind of combines everything that you really need to understand the subsurface and particularly aquifers. When I was here for my undergrad, I actually sampled the Mahomet. I was in Craig Bethke and Rob Sanford's research group, so I got to go out and actually sample monitoring wells and get my hands on some Mahomet Aquifer water right at the source. Happy to be here.
Hey everybody, my name is Andrew Rehn. I'm the Climate Policy Director at Prairie Rivers Network. I was also educated here for undergraduate, and I got a master's degree here as well, and then I've been with Prairie Rivers Network for 10 years now, working on a variety of water pollution and climate issues, things like the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, working on coal ash pollution, and most recently some of this CCS legislation that we've passed over the last few years, and hoping we can do some more on energy policy this year, but we're also big advocates for the Mahomet Aquifer, and really excited that we've made such great strides in Champaign-Urbana area to protect our sole source of water. So thanks everybody.
Hi there, everyone. I'm Pam Richart, co-director of Eco Justice Collaborative, based here in Champaign. And I had the good fortune to be part of the group that helped draft and actually pass the Safe CCS Act, as it's known, that was signed by the governor in July of this last year. And since then, as we tried to get the Mahomet Aquifer ban in that bill and failed, I've worked with very closely with Andrew to get that legislation across the line. So I may be among the, I don't think I'm the lone voice here, but I might be known as a contrarian when it comes to CCS as a tactic for climate change overall. And I hope to get a chance to share some of those points of view tonight.
Could you tell us what CCS is?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Carbon capture and storage. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Hi everybody, I'm John Hall. I'm the director of the Champaign County Planning and Zoning Department. I'm working with the task force headed up by Dr. Stohr to draft an ordinance for the county's regulation of carbon sequestration.
Worth noting, I think we're all on the task force, besides.
Not me.
Besides, yes. All besides one are on that task force.
Thank you. And just to follow on to what Jenna said, I described the well that was drilled at Parkland College that we draw the water from. Okay. Moving on, why are we here? And I think I can use that. The reason, oh my gosh, we are honored with Mr. Randy Locke, who is the expert, and probably saw my slide and is here to help set me straight. But we are here because of something that was kind of first brought up by Dr. Edward Teller, the famous physicist, who in 1959 called attention to the American Petroleum Institute, something called the greenhouse effect. And because of increasing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Some years later, Vice President Al Gore made a rather famous movie called An Inconvenient Truth, and very graphically showed what's on the screen here about the increasing carbon dioxide that's in our atmosphere and calling attention to the problems that's causing in elevated sea temperature and so forth. By way of introduction, I want to show you where we're at, and there's a nice little arrow that shows you are here, and it's we're on the Wisconsin glacial plain, and let's see here, and over on the left in the image I just showed is if we stripped away the glacial materials, you will see the very bedrock valley, and I can provide these slides so you don't need to take photos. And shows where we're at kind of in relation to the Mahomet Valley. I want to also, since we've got the slide up, show on the right the darker green glacial moraines that are glacial materials. And let's see. Now, getting to carbon capture and sequestration, I took the slide from one of Pam's presentations, and it shows Illinois Basin and capacity of the Mount Simon for storage of gases, fluids, and so forth. And you can kind of see that the red area, which has the highest capacity, that kind of lies in east central Illinois. Carbon sequestration, or carbon, it is just that, capture of carbon dioxide, mostly from processing of materials like corn, perhaps soybeans, and other, even manufacture of cement, to inject beneath the ground and store for an indefinite period. The carbon dioxide and remove it from the atmosphere. And the real reason that we're here happened in 2021 when there was when the government offered, or in 2022, when they offered incentives for injecting the carbon dioxide gas and sequestering it to the tune of about $85 per ton. And if any of the panelists have other information, please interrupt. Okay. One of the other reasons that we have of concern about carbon capture and sequestration at all is because of an unfortunate incident that happened with the 2016 leak of natural gas that was being stored in the Mount Simon, about a mile, about 5,000 feet beneath the ground, and the gas escaped through a well and contaminated the wells, private wells that were drawing from the Mahomet Aquifer. And this is taken from a report by EN Engineering that was made in 2017 for People's Gas and Light and the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. And you can kind of see the area of contamination from that accidental release. I was curious about this, so I obtained the report, and you can see that the corrosion in the well, as they pulled the casing, was at least in 2 spots and about 24 feet apart. And the engineers that did the inspection said that the corrosion, these holes that you see, were likely caused by turbulent slurry of fluids and particles, and I'm guessing that would include sand from the Mount Simon and kind of help to erode or holes in the well case. Oh, I guess. Ted reminded me that I kind of skipped and didn't mention about the stratigraphy of the local area and where the carbon dioxide would be located. And actually, let's do it on this slide. Randy, since you're here, would you care to walk us through the 2 incidents that happened down at ADM in Decatur a couple of years ago.
You're talking about Archer Daniels Midland.
Yes, ma'am.
I can first describe some of the geology, because I think that's important context. So,
I have a laser pointer if you want to use that.
okay.
Here's here.
And my apologies to Chris and the organizers, I did not anticipate being here. A meeting that we had over at the iHotel today related to CCS and assessments within the basin ran short, surprisingly. And so that allowed a number of us that are participating in that meeting to come here and sit in on the session. So, what I'll just say in general about the geology is that Illinois has a very thick sequence of material that is considered sedimentary. It's from rivers and other running water, and it's created these deposits over a long period of time. The deepest of those is a sandstone called the Mount Simon sandstone that's shown in the bottom of this diagram here. This sort of tan zone is about 1,500 feet thick, and it's about 1.5 miles underground, and that's where CO2 is stored in Decatur. The upper part of that unit is also used for natural gas storage. Illinois has the largest amount of natural gas storage in the U.S. Because we don't have a natural source of methane to be able to heat our homes. So the Mount Simon is a storage unit that's used for a range of different uses. In 2016, there was a natural gas storage well that the slide that Chris showed that had the leakage of the natural gas. Get the exact date, but 2023, I think, information related to migration of fluids from that Mount Simon from deeper zones was reported related to the carbon storage site in Decatur. And so that migration involved movement of the natural fluids that were there. The sandstone, the grains in between the sand are filled with liquid. It's very mineralized liquid, 6 times as salty as seawater. So not something that you would typically use as a drinking water source. You would not use it as a drinking water source. But that fluid migrated up along the well bore itself, along the infrastructure there, and moved into a zone directly above the cap rock that's 500 feet thick. So it's a zone that's intended to keep all of the material below it, the storage reservoir material. And then because of the construction of the well, there was a series of activities that were then done so that they could assess any additional information about what had happened with the migration, and also how to fix the well, how to change the well so there was not continued migration. All this time, the storage site operator, ADM, was working with the US EPA. US EPA was reviewing that information, and throughout the process, US EPA noted there was no endangerment to drinking water, but there was still a permit required a remediation because that material, the fluid from here, as well as the CO2 stored in the subsurface, moved to a zone that it shouldn't be in. So those wells have been remediated and changed. Their design has been changed. And so now there's just single zones in monitoring, and they have been restored, and ADM has started to check it again.
Did you talk about both leaks there? Or? Yeah, okay.
There's a second monitoring well. I talked about BW2, which is the one monitoring well that had both brine and CO2 migration. The other well is BW1. Both of those are on the storage site campus, and both of those have been remediated and changed so that there's no further migration of fluids.
Could you talk about the different cap rocks that shale layers between the Mount Simon and the Mahomet Aquifer?
Sure. So in the subsurface, you can think of rocks as either rocks that will allow fluids to move through them readily, sandstones, things that allow that migration, natural migration of material, it's called brine. It's just a highly saline fluid that's naturally resident in the pore spaces. The rocks have different properties. Those that allow that movement relatively quickly, sandstones, they're said to have high porosity, or things that will accept fluids quickly. Those that don't allow movement of fluids are said to be cap rocks, those that prevent movement. And that is this zone that I pointed out, 500 feet thick of rock that is on top of the reservoir storing the CO2. Even within the storage reservoir, there's differences in characteristics of the rock. So not all sandstones allow movement of fluid, but this is particularly good at storing fluid in the bottom part. These prevent movement of fluid, and so there's multiple layers above the storage unit that prevent upward flow. We know this because there's a difference in chemistry of the fluid, and we measured this directly. Does that help?
Yeah.
And I'll just say there are 2 other cap rocks or zones here that are called impermeable zones that are other, they're called shales, or they're both shales, so fine grained materials, not like a sandstone.
Oh, Alice without water, would any of you like some water?
I would, because you're going to hear me. That's fine. Thank you. And while we're on the subject of ADM, if I just might add a few words about that, if that's okay. Because many of you who have been following the work on the Safe CCS Act know that it was signed in July of 2024. But the reason it came about was not because of the ADM's leak, but it was because there was concern that the Class 6 well process may not be rigorous enough to protect our drinking water here in Illinois. So that bill goes above and beyond the EPA's Class 6 process, well permit process. But as we were writing the bill and moving into that, we did what we could to get a ban, and recognizing that it was important to protect the Mahomet Aquifer. I just want to underscore that. It wasn't until later, after we decided we didn't get that ban in the ordinance, that the leak happened. What I think the leak underscores is that it's...
The leak had already happened, it's just we didn't know about it.
Oh, we didn't know about it, that's true. The leak had happened, we didn't know about it, that's exactly true. In fact, the governor was signing the bill not knowing the leak had happened. That information hadn't been disclosed.
He was standing on it.
Yeah, and he was, really standing right there, half a mile away or less. But the point I guess I'm making is we have a good bill. It's a good regulatory bill. But my point is not all regulations can do what we need to have done to protect our precious source of water. And I think the ADM leak kind of speaks to that. Because first of all, there's a novel design that was approved by the EPA, proposed by the company Archer Daniels Midland. They thought it was a best practice design, and we all understand what that means because best practices are just that, and they do change over time. They used a material that had not been tested in a brine CO2 solution, and that corroded. And so while they say lessons learned, and I think that's true, lessons have been learned, we still are looking at an untested material with 25 chromium that has probably better long-term strength, but it's still not been tested. And more importantly, what we saw here in this incident was the operator failed to follow its emergency plan when the monitoring well was taken out of production, and one could argue that they should have stopped injecting before then. But the EPA didn't make them do it either. And it really wasn't until a whistleblower talked to Political that the notice of violation that was issued by the EPA became known to the public. So I guess I'm saying we can have regulations and we can do our darndest to try to protect our water. But when it comes to a source like the Mahomet, we decided there was zero risk tolerance. And I think that's borne out by what we saw here. ADM is small. They've only injected 4.5 million tons of CO2 since their inception in 2011. We're looking at the potential in the Mahomet of 50 times that in the state with the projects under review by the EPA now, that's over 100 times. So I would like to suggest that as we look at the bill that was adopted by 1723, Senate Bill 1723 most recently, that now includes the opportunity to engage with the experts, that we do that, right? That we do just that, because I think our water is important. I think understanding the risks and having that discussion is really super important. And I just think that as we move forward, we all ought to know that this is not, in my view, foolproof. We may have the geology that's most suitable in many parts of the country, but we're still human beings. We still make errors. We still are trying and testing out new designs and new materials. And it ain't foolproof. So that's what I just wanted to say.
I just wanted to make sure everyone in the room is aware of what a Class 6 well is, because I know that's been mentioned. Yeah, I figured. So, and Randy might be better at explaining this than me, but there are various classes of wells depending on what you are pumping into the well versus what you are pumping out of the well. And a Class 6 well is typically the most rigorous well because it is both deep and injecting things like carbon dioxide, supercritical carbon dioxide. I also wanted to clarify that I will say that my mom grew up in the Chicagoland and got cancer from contaminated groundwater and passed away. So I take groundwater quality very seriously. There is no intention to inject anything into the Mahomet. I just wanted to make sure that was really clear. That's not our intention or any scientist's intention. We're all trying to keep the Mahomet Aquifer safe and drinkable because I understand how important that is.
Thank you. This is why we kind of have a panel, so rather than kind of be fumbled way through this. Next topic, and we can come back to these, and I expect that we will, are the glacial meltwater channels that rural residents depend upon for their water because they reside outside the Mahomet Aquifer. And, this would be kind of a cartoon showing what might have happened with the glaciers retreating from the local area. Sediments that were in the ice melt as it melts. It kind of form moraines and also channels. And we call these channels outwash or glacial outwash channels. And you can see that they kind of exist far and few between, or at least that's what we knew in concept. It happened that geologists from the Illinois State Geological Survey did a study to look at some of these and make measurements about these based on exposures in the middle fork of the Vermilion River. And the little blue colored area are the sand channels. You can see that there's not any sand channels in the rest of that outcrop. And these range in thickness from 5 to 14 feet. And they provide limited amounts of water, about 10 gallons per minute. So although it can provide some water, it's basically you have to decide whether you're going to take a shower or run the dishwasher, okay, or run the washing machine. You don't do several things at one time. You have to really be frugal with your drinking water. They get their farmers tell me that they get the water that they need for their field use, like mixed with chemicals and so forth, by going to the drainage ditches and getting water from those. So those exist outside the specific area of the Mahomet Aquifer, which is kind of in the light blue. There, Champaign County was the first to kind of have HTEM, the helicopter transient electromagnetic geophysics, flown over the county to get a better understanding not only of the extent of the Mahomet Aquifer, but also the content, the sediments inside, because it's not all sand. Some of it is clay, so it doesn't provide water, or wouldn't be a source of water. It may even separate individual sand units. And so those are shown down, but unfortunately they didn't fly the entire county, and there's kind of some areas that were John Paul pointed out in the southern part of the county, primary sand and gravel aquifers that are kind of exist as kind of isolated blobs and I'm really rather interested to find out, I hope, whether these are somehow connected with a larger aquifer, perhaps the Mahomet, or something that we don't yet know too much about. Okay, and we kind of basically already talked about the state legislation. Thank you, Pam and Andrew.
There's a lot more to
Yeah,
say
there's
if
a
you
lot
wanted
to
to.
say.
And we have plenty of time for that. And I'm kind of, let's go ahead and do that, and then we'll come back to the county stuff. Andrew?
Well, I think there might also just be more to say about the Mahomet Aquifer itself and the sole source designation as well, if that would be of interest. And I'm happy to just kind of popcorn this mic around a little bit. I think notably in a subject of our discussion at the Champaign County ordinance discussion on the task force that Chris leads, we're still learning a lot about the Mahomet Aquifer and the boundaries and how the aquifer behaves and responds. We've been studying it for a long time, and there's still, even then, there's still a lot more to learn. And this H10, which is flying a device that emits sound below a helicopter, is that right, Chris? Anybody?
Electromagnetics.
Electromagnetics below a helicopter gets us even better visualizations of what we're seeing, and so that's exciting. And actually, the results, I believe, is it water survey or geological survey?
Geological survey.
You guys are producing some really cool results. Maybe you want to talk about that. That is going to let us understand and really see the aquifer and what it looks like in sort of 3 dimensions. So that's one direction we could go. I think I wanted to say, first of all, the sole source designation was the result of a lot of folks who worked really hard to get the US EPA to designate the Mahomet Aquifer as a sole source aquifer. Sole source in this case means that the communities that rely on the aquifer would not have an economically viable alternative drinking water source, and there's some more details of exactly what it requires what percentage of communities need to be dependent on it for it to be the case. But it's certainly fair to say Champaign-Urbana, we wouldn't exist without the Mahomet Aquifer and the water that we get from that. There's not a reservoir around here, there's no river big enough for us to pull this kind of water out of. And so our community, the one that we're sitting in, that I assume many of you live in, is really dependent on the Mahomet Aquifer to be our sole water source. And so it was a campaign to get that designation from the US EPA. There were a bunch of communities involved, so east to west, there were communities that came together, a lot of leadership at the city level, but also activists starting that process. Was anybody in the audience here involved in fighting for the sole source designation? Raise your hands. All right, I'm seeing a lot of hands. That's great. Thank you all. Thank you all for your work and what you've done. A designation like the sole source designation has, it's got a value. It does something regulatorily, but it does a lot more than that in practice. It's a stated value of a resource. It's something that we can go to legislators, to community leaders and say, look, this designation is here to protect this aquifer. Is an acknowledgement that this is a valuable resource. And that goes a long way. In practice, what this designation does is if there's federal money involved in a project, that the government, the federal government, I'm not sure if it's just US EPA or if it's a broader scope, it's a broader scope. Yeah. There's more review involved of a project if there's federal money involved. And so that's actually a pretty limited trigger of when the sole source designation is kicking in to provide stronger protections. So it's our job to use this sole source designation to kick in and provide stronger protections. And so that, I think, is maybe a bit of background on the sole source designation and why it's valuable. So yeah, before we move on from the Mahomet Aquifer, I don't know if anybody else wants to jump in or add anything.
No, I'll just say that Al Wehrman sends his regrets. He was going to be here, but unfortunately he's out of the country chasing black rhinoceros and elephants over in Africa.
Not hunting them, I hope.
No, of course not. He's
With
on
his
a
camera.
camera.
Great,
Camera,
great.
okay.
Non-lethal
Camera
cameras.
safari, yeah. And he's a very good photographer. Randy?
Yeah, I'd also just like to mention that there have been there's been previous work at the state level to be able to look at Mahomet Aquifer protections. I believe it was in 2018, the Mahomet Aquifer Protection Task Force produced a report that was based on about a year worth of work, maybe 10 to 12 meetings. It involved multiple legislators, a number of folks that are on the panel here participated, including the State Geological Survey, State Water Survey. Geological Survey was not a member, Water Survey was a member, but providing technical assistance. It was a committee led by the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency and headed by Mayor Finan. Through that work, there were a number of subcommittees that looked at what are the potential threats to the aquifer. And then that included a range of assessments. Were there legacy landfills? Are there existing landfills? Are there surface application of chemicals? Are there wells? What kinds of wells are they? That assessment, I think, was very important in setting a framework and understanding of the potential for contamination and or impact to the aquifer. I like that discussion because it's around a risk-based framework. What are the likely things or potential things to happen? What's the likelihood that they could impact the aquifer? So the recommendations, one of the recommendations of the Protection Task Force was to map it better, provide more information so we know more of where it is and where what areas should be protected. But anyway, I just wanted to highlight that there was that report, and again, I think the risk-based approach, assessing what likelihood and or types of potential contaminant sources was an important context in being able to protect the aquifer.
So Randy, where can people find that report? That's a great report.
Yeah. It's online. If you search Mahomet Aquifer Protection Task Force, it has to have the word protection in there. Mahomet Aquifer Protection Task Force, you'll find the report. That was authored by the task force with support from the Prairie Research Institute and the Water and Geological Surveys.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing up the landfills. There are 218 of them over the Mahomet Aquifer, and those are displayed on the screen behind you. Location. And the reason why I appreciate Randy mentioning the landfills is because that's a land use that we really don't like to have. We don't like landfills near us. We tolerate that they have to be made because when we put our trash out on Wednesday morning, we'd like it to go away. And we don't like to spend too much time thinking about it. carbon dioxide is kind of the same thing. It's something that we don't necessarily want to kind of give a whole lot of consideration to. We don't want to change our lifestyle. We've had plenty of warnings from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change for years. And human behavior and activities have not changed, and so we have to find ways in which to mitigate this rather I never expected to say carbon dioxide is a waste, but it's a waste product, and it should be dealt with in a very thoughtful way. Okay, thanks, Randy. And oh, your cup of coffee. And let's see. We can go on to some other things. We're moving ahead a little faster because I didn't harangue people too much about the Manlove gas field leak. I will, some things that Randy said kind of reminded me that that the engineers that did the forensic kind of pointed out that the wells were constructed of typical 1970s vintage, and they kind of indicated that maybe this might not have even been the very best choice at the time, but this was state of the art or state of the practice, let's say, at that, during that period. And we all depend on natural gas for some other reasons. Okay. We've talked a little bit about the state legislation, and
We're back. Can I talk about the state legislation?
thank goodness,
Would
yes.
you like an overview of what's in it, or do you have a slide? Oh, you've got a slide.
Well, you can elaborate on this, Andrew. You're very familiar with it.
Do you want to do it?
Yeah, well, we go back and forth. If you don't say something, I'll go back.
Okay, so the Safe CCS Act, which passed not last spring, but the spring before that, so spring in 2024, was a negotiated bill, the result of pretty intense negotiations ultimately between environmental community, labor, industry, and the governor's office, with the support and advice from various regulatory bodies. And what that ended up doing was regulating the whole process of carbon capture and sequestration, from the capture part to the transportation part and to the sequestration part. And in some of those examples, some of those areas, we had some existing protections and some we didn't. I guess we had something in all of them, but it layered on protections on top of existing federal concerns for each of those three different tasks involved in the carbon capture and sequestration process. Let's see, I didn't have a cheat sheet printed, so do you want to walk through all the different parts of the, not all of them, but highlights?
Okay, I can walk through a few highlights, and maybe I'll stick mostly to water, but there are a few things that I think are really interesting to build. First of all, we do now require here in the state of Illinois an Illinois EPA permit to do carbon capture. There was a lot of discussion and a lot of disagreement as to whether or not that was even needed, but we've got it. Some of the things that I think that we did that are good in this bill, we've got co-pollutant protections, which means that if you're going to do carbon capture and you're going to run your plants harder and you're going to emit more pollutants, you can't emit more pollutants. You have to find a way through best practices, or perhaps looking at I want to say offsets or credits from another facility. But in other words, the concern was, especially when you've got plants in highly populated areas, densely populated areas, primarily and often related to people of color, like in Chicago, living around those two old coal plants, there are Latino neighborhoods, that you don't want to impose additional health-harming problems on those folks. So that was huge, and it was a hard-won protection. When we go to some of the water piece, I think most of what's going to be happening here is assessment reports. So the state is going to say, we want to know how much information has been used for carbon capture, and that includes pumping rates, impacts of the water resource like aquifer drawdown, river reductions, etc., and impact assessments on nearby users. So I think that was a strong step towards being able to understand what carbon capture might do to our precious water sources. There's not a mandate necessarily on any of this. It's like impact assessment and reports. There's also going to be a report every 5 years that the Illinois EPA is going to do on carbon capture efficiency rates. That still has been really in flux. It was when we started talking about this as part of the bill, and I think there's still a lot of understanding as what kind of rate might be required for specific industries. And also an environmental justice analysis on carbon capture facilities and how they might affect EJ communities. So there'll be a report every 5 years that will address all of that. Pipelines is where I've been heavily involved. Some of you may know me from that. We actually were fortunate enough to be able, I think almost at the last minute, get a moratorium on CO2 pipelines. It's good for about another 11 months, 10 and a half months, I guess. It expires in July of 2026. And it was intended to be dovetailing with regulations that were underway by the federal government, the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, who had committed to providing a rule, which wasn't released until the last week of the Biden administration, and now it's been withdrawn by the Trump administration, and the New Pipes Act is not including any safety regulations at all. But we got the moratorium, and we got some language there before the Illinois Commerce Commission that sort of opens up the door to do a little bit more.
Could you go back and say again what you said about withdrawing safety protections on the pipeline?
Oh, the rulemaking? Yeah. Okay, so PHMSA, the Pipeline and Hazardous Safety Administration, right? Federal, part of the DOT, US DOT, had committed after there was an accident in Mississippi, and I'm assuming, maybe I shouldn't assume anything, most of you know about it, but it was an accident that CO2 pipeline ruptured, released a lot of CO2, it traveled more than a mile, required the evacuation of 200, 45 people were hospitalized, and as they looked into this accident, the federal folks, they decided they needed to improve CO2 regulations and safety, and they needed to improve oversight. So that was the intent of the rule, and it had been going on for like 2 or more years. So they finally did it, and I'm here to say I looked at it with others who know better about these things than I do, and it was a good rule. So it had almost everything that the environmental community, the Pipeline Safety Trust, had requested. It was a good rule. But because it was introduced at the last week of the Biden administration, it was not published. Even if it had been published, any new administration is probably going to withdraw for a while at least. But I think as we've watched where this new administration is going, they're looking to how do I say this? I'm not going to say this. I'm just going to say there is no evidence that rule is going to see the light of day. Let me just say that. And there is other legislation in process that we're working on. So, but here in Illinois, we were able to get a few good things. We were not able to get safe setbacks, which would require another whole level of discussion. I will say that all 3 pipelines that have come to Illinois have been precariously close to occupied buildings, and have exposed people, not everybody, but have exposed people to concentrations that are determined to be immediately dangerous to life and health. And so we really needed and really wanted to get more work done there. We didn't get that, but what we did get was a risk assessment, so that the pipeline developer is now going to have to do a risk assessment but through modeling and through a comprehensive modeling program to be able to determine if emergency responders can actually get there to save you if there's a leak or rupture. So that's good. So there's more work to be done there, but I do think that there are some important things that happened in that bill, including funding of emergency equipment, funding of training that will be offered to residents, et cetera, twice a year. A lot of good stuff in that bill, and there's going to be a rulemaking on that will begin this month, theoretically this month. So, and then lastly, the sequestration piece, I think as I look back on why we wanted to have a regulatory bill, why we needed that here in Illinois, we were experiencing interest from industry in coming into Illinois. And there were a few pieces that Illinois didn't have in place that would allow, that really defined what pore space was, who owned it, and how it could be aggregated or assembled before a project could go forward. So industry put its bill together, the environmental community looked at it and said, gee, we're not sure that's going to do what needs to be done here, and then set out to do more. So now some of the things that are in that bill that I think are important. We now do define pore space as being owned by surface owners, and that's great. There's a percentage required of 75% of the surface area to be assembled before a project can be moved forward. There are protections. In fact, if water is contaminated, it has to be replaced. This is one of the reasons why folks like Prairie Rivers Network and Eco Justice Collaborative said, you're looking at a sole source aquifer, how are you going to replace any water that's contaminated? And that was one of the driving forces behind taking the steps farther, the bill forward rather. There are a lot of fees that assure that there is money set aside for what needs to be set aside in case there's an accident. There's medical monitoring that's required in case there's an accident. Anybody in the area of the plume can get a CO2 monitor if they want one, etc. Liability never passes to the state. That's really huge. So one of the big tenets of this bill was to say, hey, if you're going to do this, we as the state of Illinois don't want to be liable. And then there are a few things that went above and beyond Class 6, like soil and surface air, soil gas rather, and surface air monitoring. The biggest one, and I think it's the biggest one here, is that if the current regulations by the US EPA say, and I can be corrected by the expert here, but as I understand them to be set forth, that a 50-year post-injection closure period should be put in place for a sequestration project. In other words, the goal is to make sure that before anybody is ending a project, that all agencies know that it's safe to do so, because it takes a long time for CO2 to stop being a threat. So in current practice, we're seeing that shortened to 10, 12 years. So Illinois started out by saying we want 100 years, which, maybe was maybe a bit over the top. But 75 years is what we thought we had agreed to. And then it was a real fight to get a 30-year period on the books. But that's longer than the 10 and the 12 years that we're seeing happen now. And then there's insurance that's required, etc. So, and again, one has to have a permit. Before you come to the state of Illinois, you have to have your permit from the US EPA, and once you have that, then you can apply for a state permit, but not until then. And then the last piece is, in Illinois, we have a ban on the use of enhanced oil recovery. And that means that this captured carbon cannot be used here in Illinois to get more oil out of the ground, because when you do that and you burn it, then you have more emissions and you're negating what you tried to do in the first place. So there's a lot of good, long-term trust fund paid into by the developers, a lot of money that's required up front, much more so than would be with the Class 6 process in place by the US EPA.
The Safe CCS, or the bill that we passed this year is quite a bit easier than that, and I think one of the driving factors was you can add layers and layers of regulation, but ultimately regulation can fail, companies don't report, the agencies don't take action, and so, and for a number of reasons, we pushed for the SB 1723, what a boring name, but the bill that bans carbon sequestration over, under, or through the Mahomet Aquifer, and thanks to Senator Faraci, Senator Rose, Representative Ammons, and Representative Schweizer, and a bunch of others who supported the bill and got it passed. Came out 55-0 out of the Senate, which is pretty great, completely bipartisan. So that's the easier one to describe because the bill itself is only a couple sentences. So that's that. I think we should try to get to the Champaign so that John Hall can tell us a little bit about how zoning works. Unless somebody else wanted to jump in on the bills.
Well, the task force is reviewing draft amendment, and once they have something they're comfortable with, they'll refer that back to the Environment and Land Use Committee of the County Board, and ELUC will decide if they're comfortable to send that for public hearings at the Zoning Board of Appeals. I hope you all come to those public hearings. We're going to need support. The ZBA will hold those public hearings and then make a recommendation back to the Environment and Land Use Committee. And then the Environment and Land Use Committee will make a final recommendation to the County Board. I don't really know how long this might take at the Zoning Board. If it begins public hearings in January, I would hope it could be through in a few months. We've not had any opposition for the moratorium that we have in place now. So hopefully this will be a quick thing. We are having to extend the moratorium. The County Board adopted a temporary safety moratorium in January of this year. That'll end in January of 26. We're not going to have a final amendment on the books by then. So we're going to amend that safety moratorium another 6 months, hopefully have this all wrapped up by April of 26. That's optimistic.
I don't understand your language. A moratorium on safety? You don't need
No.
that.
A moratorium on sequestration
Okay.
until we get a permanent ordinance in place.
Do you want to? Yeah, I'll take the mic for just a little bit. Part of the reason that this came about is that Champaign County may not have any jurisdiction over the Mahomet Aquifer, but we do have some jurisdiction over activities and surface activities that are related to the Mahomet Aquifer. Surrounding counties have instituted an outright ban on carbon sequestration in their county. That's not legally defensible.
Maybe.
Probably not. You can't prohibit wind turbines or solar farms either. And these are, and so Champaign County elected to try to take a more thoughtful approach in looking at ways in which we can identify areas that would be prohibited, like beneath the Mahomet Aquifer, but areas where sequestration might be permitted by special use permit. And this is a somewhat involved procedure. And that would be in kind of the rural areas I talked about that had the low yielding glacial meltwater channels. John, would you care to run us through what is involved in getting a special use permit, please?
Well, a special use, in this case, we're recommending a county board approved special use permit. We have a 40-page amendment outlining all the studies that need to be done. Most of the studies are done as part of the Class 6 process. We need some of that at a local level to determine the special use permit. We also want money set aside to decommission everything when it's done. We want to have a noise study so we know what the noise impacts are. I've been over at the Decatur facility, and when they're injecting, the noise is phenomenal. So I'm interested to see how they can meet Pollution Control Board noise standards with something like that. But anyhow, we define the standards. That's what the task force is working on. Eventually, this will be an amendment to the zoning ordinance. And when someone wants to do sequestration in Champaign County, they'll have to make an extensive application showing, number one, they're not doing it in or near, well, in, under, or over the Mahomet Aquifer. Hopefully we'll also protect other lesser-known aquifers in Champaign County. That's a challenging process because even though there are published maps of all the aquifers in Champaign County, we're finding they're really not adequate for regulatory purposes. And so that's another part of this process. Show us that you're not going to be endangering any other aquifer in Champaign County. And once that's all done, then perhaps Champaign County will approve a special use permit. That will be determined by the county board. But again, it starts at the zoning board, goes through the Environment and Land Use Committee, and then for the county board. And that will be an extensive process that I'm not looking forward to, but it's important, and I think it'll be a good thing to have once it's all in place.
Thank you. Oh, you first.
I just wanted to provide some of my awareness of the ejection process, and I was a little surprised to hear that noise was one of the major concerns that you had. And would like to learn a little bit more about that. At the wellhead, the process, and I've been standing next to the wellhead quite a number of times, it's nearly silent. The compression dehydration facility, some of the machinery is noisier. That's the location at which a lot of the machinery is. Maybe that's might be what you're referring to as part of that process. But it depends on where you are as to what the actual noise levels are. I will mention there are some opportunities to visit the Decatur site. There's the National Sequestration Education Center that's hosted at Richland Community College, but it is a learning facility run by the college, and there are opportunities for CCS learning days just to go and ask questions. If anybody's interested, let me know. I can help you become familiar with those dates and make folks aware of those if they're interested in participating. I also did want to just quickly touch on the length of time that's required to monitor these sites. The default period of time to monitor after you're done injecting from a federal standpoint is 50 years. That's the default. If there's any proposed shorter period of time, the project applicant then has to submit information as to why they would recommend that shorter period of time. EPA reviews it and then will either agree or disagree with it. And EPA, it's up to EPA to decide those lengths of time as to whether or not they're sufficient. There's always an ongoing back and forth conversation between the permit holder and the regulator. The regulator then is setting the requirements for the permit holder. The permit holder does not get to walk away from a site unless the EPA is satisfied that all of the requirements are met. And so that's an important part of the federal regulatory process. Just wanted to provide that as some context of the total length of time.
Thank you, and I just wanted to clarify a little teeny bit what you just said about the other counties. Because DeWitt County does have an outright ban, but McLean County has had a special use permit required for carbon injection wells, CO2 injection wells for good 2 years. And they're looking to amend that to strengthen it. Ford County does, in fact, ban injection wells in its county. If it follows the Mahomet Aquifer ordinance, you can't inject through or store under. Excuse me, you can't inject through. You can store under, but you can't inject through. And then they allow it by special use elsewhere. Christian County has an ordinance not yet adopted. Tazewell County is working on one as well. But both of those will look at it by special use, just like Champaign County. So.
And I just want to give a shout out both to John and Pam for their work on the permit language. This is hard, complicated stuff. Pam's provided a lot of content on that. And John puts together these really impressive packets, and we go through those at the task force meetings. And I know it's a lot of work, and so thank you both for the time that you put into that. That's all I have.
Alice, do we have audience questions?
We have some questions, yes.
Okay.
And we might be able to open that mic up. We just wanted to do this at first until we could get sort of more organized. Anyway, one question. Could you summarize the findings and concerns of the task force regarding usage or depletions of rates? Did I read that right? Or recharge sources and adequacy?
Like a quantity is what you're asking about?
Quantity?
Yeah,
Yeah.
use it, you know, how's it being used and is it being replenished?
Recharge.
And the dangers and risks from landfills, agricultural runoff, other issues, pollutants.
Hey, you're really new here. I hate to kind
No, I
of
can
put you
try.
on the spot. You got
I can try
it?
again. So I'm going to repeat the question just so I understand. So the question was, can we elaborate on recharge rates to the Mahomet Aquifer, discharge rates from the Mahomet Aquifer, and then other potential sources of pollution that could enter the aquifer in the recharge zone? Yeah, okay. I will say I don't know exact recharge rates and discharge rates. Randy, I don't know if you know them off the top of your head, but most of the way that we're managing water in the state of Illinois is in what we call a sustainable way. So we're trying to ensure that our estimates on recharge, so what recharge is essentially water falls on the land surface, and typically it can enter areas of porous rock, and Randy talked about that before, and that provides a conduit or a path for that water to reach the subsurface, and in this case the Mahomet Aquifer. That water for the Mahomet has to travel 300 to 500 feet underground, and that also provides a mechanism for that water to be naturally filtered by the rock. So you have water-rock interactions that might pull specific constituents. Sometimes you can think of them as pollutants, but not everything in water is a pollutant. Could pull that out as they react with the rock, and then alternatively you could have water-rock interactions where the water is actually dissolving things from that rock into it. Once you get down into the aquifer, that's what it is withdrawn. And like I said, we try in the state to ensure that rates going up equal rates going in. Does that work in every single instance? No. The goal is to kind of manage that risk over time. So in a time like right now where we're experiencing a drought, we might see drawdown levels, so extraction from the aquifer exceed the amount of water that is infiltrating into that aquifer. But we understand we need to have water to drink, and we hope that future climate will help assist in replenishing that aquifer. I can say that we provide information online, the Illinois State Water Survey, about water table levels, so where the water is underground. If the water table is lower, that can generally be correlated to increased use from that aquifer. I know McLean County was mentioned earlier. McLean is seeing exceptional amounts of drawdown in their aquifer right now based on the data we're collecting. So is that due to the drought? Probably, but we're also seeing major water users come into that county. So the water survey in general is trying to assess the situation. We're involved in the state water plan task force, and we're actually constantly being asked about water use. Yes, there is risk associated with putting anything on the land surface because it has the opportunity to infiltrate into drinking water sources. This is far more important for people on private wells. So when their water is not being filtered or treated at a municipal water supply center, probably not the right word, but they're extracting it directly and using it right in their homes. So we have an entire program at the Water Survey that tries to educate and work with individuals that are on private wells to ensure that their water is clean. I know I'm kind of dodging the question a little bit, but yes, we are seeing impacts to groundwater now from things we're putting at the surface. Linking this to carbon sequestration and the protection of the Mahomet Aquifer, it's in my opinion, not necessarily the Water Survey's opinion or the university's opinion, it's all a balance of risk, right? Like, we want our cell phones, we want to keep the lights on in the room, we want this beautiful fancy projector, but we might not be willing to sequester carbon sequestration and mitigate the impacts of climate change and other things that are caused by increasing CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere. So it's definitely a balance. Like, we want to ensure that we have food to eat, but people are concerned about fertilizer that we're putting on the ground surface. We want to have tires on our cars, but we're concerned about microplastics and PFAS entering our water sources. So it's definitely a balance, and it's hard to, in my opinion, it's hard to quantify exact risk until you can really understand the subsurface geology and understand recharge pathways and how much water we're using, and that's something that we're studying extensively across the Prairie Research Institute between the Water Survey and the Geological Survey. Did that answer your question?
That was wonderful.
Okay, thank you. Don't clap. It's not because I remember clapping.
Randy, did you want to elaborate on that?
That was wonderful. No, I think she said it all. I do have one point about withdrawals.
We've been trying to figure this out, and I believe the water survey is responsible for, large water users have to report to the water survey. I think it's like 70 gallons a minute. Do you know the exact number?
70.
And so we can develop it, that is one pathway where the water survey has an understanding of withdrawals that are happening from the aquifer or from other water sources.
Absolutely.
But what happens if somebody doesn't report to you?
Completely agree. Right now, there's mandated reporting, but the policy does not really have any teeth behind it. So it is difficult in some instances to ascertain exact extraction from aquifers, but again, we're doing the best that we can with the data that we have, is what I can say.
Yep. And I'll say, I think that's why some of the real-time groundwater monitoring is really important, and Illinois American Water has been funding that for the last 20 or so years. Also talking about, the balance, I think that's why the Champaign County ordinance is something that's really positive. It is a balance. We see impacts from climate change on our water sources, both in groundwater and surface water, things like increasing harmful algal blooms, something we deal with, all summer long in places where they weren't before. Mississippi River, we've been dealing with them all summer. And so that's why I think that, outright ban of a technology like carbon capture outside, I think it was said, but it bears repeating, nobody's injecting carbon dioxide into the Mahomet Aquifer. But in those areas outside the Mahomet Aquifer, I think it can be maybe an important technology to deal with climate change. And that's why I think the nuance of the Champaign County ordinance is a positive thing to not outright ban.
Thank you. Randy?
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of add to that. And I said earlier, I really appreciate a risk-based approach in looking at what potential impacts there can be. Jenna mentioned that in a very eloquent way of these trade-offs, right? So there are things that we desire as a modern society or as individuals, and there are trade-offs with those. We currently get our energy sources roughly 1/3 from coal right now, and that is increasing during the evenings when solar and other renewables are not available. We also get a substantial amount of that from nuclear within this Midwestern regional area that supplies the energy on the grid. So there are these existing mixes of energy, and one of the things that I think is important also to focus on is that risk. Is there additional risk? Is that risk likely? And what would be the potential severity of something? So the Protection Task Force report listed a range of different potential risks. That was very helpful. I want to highlight some of the work that the Water Survey does. The real-time monitoring is important, as mentioned. The work that the Water Survey does at looking at capacity or availability of water in an aquifer is very important, because that tells you if you have an additional capacity, and you need to continue to collect that data to understand if you are using up that capacity. Anytime a 70-gallon per minute well is using, that's considered a high capacity well, that's around 100,000 gallons per day, then those wells are the ones that would withdraw more water. It's helpful to look at what potential impacts they have adjacent to the area. One quick thing about Class 6, though, I would like to mention that Class 6 is a rigorous federal permitting process, and it uses a risk-based approach in evaluating what potential there is for either migration along a well or potential geologic, suitable geology. There are requirements for a range of different plans to be developed in advance of any construction that happens. In the case of Champaign County, there are no proposed wells within Champaign County. I just want to make sure that that's been stated, that's clear. There are no proposed wells for carbon dioxide injection in Champaign County. And given the amount of time that it takes for permitting through the US EPA, it would be a minimum of 2 years, more likely closer to 3 years, before any well would be proposed and any construction activity could occur. Not even injection, just a construction activity.
These are the 4 sites that I think I got those from you, Pam. I put them on
So 2 in Champaign County, 1 in DeWitt, and 1 in Lincoln.
There's more than that being proposed statewide.
Those are existing?
This is this map isn't quite accurate to, yeah.
Right, those are project sites. There are individual wells within the project sites. There are approximately 20 to 25 applications within the Illinois region. And again, for perspective, we have the largest amount of natural gas storage, which uses the same rocks as are being used for carbon dioxide storage, being proposed for carbon dioxide storage. When we talk about scale, this area produces, and that's a very large number, but 300 million tons of CO2. I don't even have, that's a very difficult number to picture in your mind, but I just want to put it in terms of to actually make an impact or to reduce the CO2 that goes into the atmosphere. Some concepts considered are called net zero. Anything that goes up, you try to mitigate in some way or avoid that emission. That's the scale of the problem. That's coming from our power generation facilities, that's coming from other industrial facilities. This is not just a power generation issue. This is a decarbonization of industry. So steel is one of those industries, cement is one of those industries that requires this kind of action to reduce the impact on the atmosphere. And carbon management has been one of those things that is anticipated to be and stated to be, and a required part of the toolkit from a range of different national and international organizations. So this is why the conversation is very good. It's important to get this discussion out. And anyway, I appreciated the questions. I didn't want to interrupt any other ones, but are there others that you'd like to get to?
You got another question?
You may have addressed this already, but can you speak more about the difference between the depth of the Mahomet Aquifer and the anticipated carbon injection depths?
Oh, yeah. Randy?
I think it's roughly 6,000 feet, Randy?
For injection.
The difference in the formations.
So the base of the Mahomet at its deepest is 500 feet from the surface. It's usually a little shallower, but 500 feet is the deepest that it is. And then remember, there's layers of geology, layers of permeable and impermeable rocks going down 1.5 miles below that into where the storage would occur and is occurring in Decatur. So 1.5 miles separation between where the potable water is and where the storage is occurring.
Alice, do you want to stand on this side?
Yeah.
I invited Alice to stand on this side. Or just hand the mic to Randy directly.
Why don't I just go over there?
Yeah. The podium mic,
Or
too.
anything else? Yeah, Alice, you could use the podium
I
mic.
answered the first
Pardon
question.
me?
It's
You
all
can use the
Randy.
podium
You
mic.
two had the mic for a while too.
Oh, no, use the podium mic.
Sorry, I was mostly thinking. Maybe
There's
to
a
make
few
this
cords
look
back here. Okay, question. What eventually happens to the injected CO2, and how long does it take? As well as what happens when the CO2 interacts with groundwater, subsurface?
Oh,
You want me to do this one, or you want to do this one?
I'm fine either way.
Okay, so the CO2 is injected at these depths as a supercritical fluid. And the goal is to have it dissolve into the brine, the undrinkable formation water at depth, and to also crystallize as a rock over time. That generally takes quite a while, but that is the ultimate goal, to sequester the CO2. Some of it will remain in that supercritical state, kind of, floating as its own blob, might be a good way to put it, but ultimately the goal is over 100+ years to get that CO2 to mineralize or to turn into a rock. The hope is that the CO2 is not interacting with groundwater, right? We're keeping it at depth, we're keeping it at that approximately 5,500 to 7,000 feet below ground surface. But yes, if as you inject CO2 into any sort of water, or you have CO2 or a carbon source interacting with water, generally you have CO2 dissolution into that water, and depending on the pH and redox chemistry, basically what that means is other stuff that's in the water, that'll depend or drive the CO2 to behave in certain ways. So CO2, only so much CO2 can dissolve in water, only so much CO2 can precipitate out, and all of that depends on the chemistry of the water. Randy, do you want to elaborate?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately the goal is to keep it out of the atmosphere.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. That's the reason why it was been mentioned that CO2 is as a waste product, byproduct of combustion or of other activities. And yes, turning it into a rock, allowing natural processes to keep it 1.5 miles underground, turned into a rock so it doesn't actually move. And that's part of the assessment of how long should you monitor it. So this is the conversation between the operator and the regulator. Once you stop injecting, you are not increasing the pressure as much, so a lot of the potential for it to move changes, and it decreases that likelihood that it would move. It still would be potentially buoyant, but it also has a lot less reason to move without that extra injection. And so it just takes that time, and ultimate goal, lock it up, keep it out of the atmosphere so it's not interacting there and creating additional weather change, longer term climate impact.
Okay, we do want to sum this up about 7:30, so we'll have a few more questions here. And then we can mingle for a little while. They're not going to be able to close this, kick us out of here until about 8:30. So, okay, one of the last questions. How can long-term CO2 sequestration be assured for future generations with loss possible such as massive news, like an earthquake or something? I think I'm reading this right. For water and status of the Clinton landfill. That was a little garbled, but
That was
maybe
two questions. The guy from the water company hasn't spoken about protection of the landfill or the aquifer much. But the first part is just generally, how can you assure 7 generations that the carbon's not going to come out eventually? So. You can't.
So we can, because we've directly measured the chemistry of the water that's in the deep subsurface. And there's such a difference between the chemistry in that lowest layer, that's 6 times saltier than seawater, and the layer above the cap rock that is still nearly twice as salty as seawater. We know that that difference can only occur over a very long period of time. That tells us that those 2 zones are isolated.
Well, what if the strata is disrupted? That's the point
With
I'm
an
making.
earthquake or...
Yes.
Right, and what I'm saying is that that strata has been in existence for eons and eons, and it hasn't, the chemistry is showing us that it's been stable for that period of time. This is,
Can I ask, Randy, hold on to that. How long is oil and the natural gas that they take out from southern Illinois, how long has that been in the ground?
I don't have a direct...
It'd be tens of millions of
well,
years.
as far as the evolution of that and the emplacement of oil, the length of time it takes, it's a very long, of course, long process for materials to turn into oil and gas. And they are then trapped, and that's why they are still available, because they're not moving around, they're not leaking, they're not migrating. That's why they are emplaced. And that's what I was just trying to get to with the fluid chemistry. We know the differences because of how different they are. They haven't intermingled, they haven't moved.
And I think Dr. Shelton had a comment.
One other thing that we do as scientists when we're looking for potential areas for carbon sequestration or injection of fluids is we look for previous seismic activity, like earthquakes. So we would never try to inject carbon dioxide along the ring of fire, right? Because it might be more prone to plate tectonics, things moving, earthquakes. So it's just part of that assessment of risk that Randy was talking about, where we would, it's possible, right? It's possible, but this water that I'm drinking might be tens of thousands of years old. So we also have an idea that fluids can reside in the subsurface for very long times. And we make conscious efforts, or I hope that scientists are making conscious efforts to avoid potential areas where they have increased risk for things like earthquakes or other natural processes.
They're part of the Class 6 process.
It is part of the Class 6 process, and this is where you and I need to have a glass of wine. Because I'm in the process of looking at 6 or 7 different applications here, and I would like to say that I have a lot of questions about EPA's review of these projects and being site-specific. So I do have concerns that I would like to chat with you about it too, because it is supposed to be the most rigorous process, but boy, some of the stuff looks pretty boilerplate to me. And I'm getting some professional help looking at these applications, so it's not me, the non-scientist, it's me working with scientists. With respect to will it permanently stay there we're talking permanent, right? And that's what I think your question's about, right? And I would like to be able to say that I would agree that if you inject it, we got the solid cap, et cetera, it's there forever. But maybe Ancona gas field is not the best example, but they injected their gas, right, into the Mount Simon, and it started leaking in 1967, and it's still leaking. And it came up through caps and fissures, right? And I think that what I have read is CO2 behaves in a similar way because it's buoyant. I do think we have to look at the potential for those induced earthquakes, because what we're doing is we're pressurizing a huge area, and we're changing the dynamics, right? So there's a whole lot we could talk about that whole system, and we're already beyond time. But you and I never had that conversation, and so I extend that invitation to you again.
Cheers.
And I hope you're going to accept it.
I think
Okay.
you're gonna
There you go.
We do have the room for longer. The library-
Invitation gladly accepted. Your choice of wine or beverage of choice, whatever, tea, anything. But I also just want to make sure that it's clear that both Dr. Shelton and I are here as scientists and intending to be scientific advisors to all stakeholders. We are not trying to advocate for one particular thing or another. We are here to make scientific assessments, and we are available to all of you as part of our jobs in being able to evaluate information, and that we have served for the Champaign County Task Force as a scientific advisor, for the Mahomet Aquifer Protection Task Force, the state level task forces. So we're here to try and sort through the science and risk evaluations and any other resource information that is useful in helping understand the issue.
Or connect you with the expert that can give you the better answer.
Absolutely, that's right.
That's why I asked these distinguished experts to come here. Thank you. We're near the end, and I'll ask a final question about the Mahomet Aquifer Study Advisory Commission. This was something that was set up by the Senate Bill 1723, and I'm kind of looking at the list of Mahomet Aquifer organizations that we have here. The Mahomet Aquifer Council was established in, I think, 2022, and has never met.
Okay.
That's right. It never established a quorum of people, never got a quorum of appointments. And, yeah, I could talk about that. That's another glass of wine. But would any of the panelists care to talk about what the advisory commission will be charged to do, and what you'd like to see the outcomes?
You guys are tasked with it, I think,
Yeah, you
so
are.
if you want to.
I have to leave, thank you. Very much.
Thank you.
So we have yet to see, it was in the bill, but I believe it was not necessarily funded. So the activities will need to be evaluated in that context. As I said, we stand ready to do evaluations that are then helpful to any assessment, whether that's of a particular resource or potential risk to that resource or activity. As I recall, it is a multi-year study with an annual report required from Prairie Research Institute on sequestration and its potential and its relationship to water safety, water protection.
I think CCS specific.
Right. CCS related to water safety, water protection.
And my read of that was the recommendation would follow that 5-year study, and it would deal with the suitability of injecting CO2 through and storing it under the recharge areas of the Mahomet Aquifer and the Mahomet Aquifer itself, which to me opens a door to say, if that study says X, we could be looking at new legislation that might overturn the ban, which is why I said, when you get to that point, get engaged, because that bill also provides a lot of opportunity for public engagement.
engagement for the county ordinance as well. If you'll indulge me, I have two slides that are some of my favorite. Is the list of Mahomet Aquifer organization. It's not a complete list, but it regulatory organization, the U.S. and Illinois Environmental Protection Agency, Illinois Department of Agriculture and Natural Resources, and Illinois Water Authorities. And there are, maybe surprised to learn that there are 13 water authorities that have some jurisdiction over the Mahomet Aquifer, none in Champaign County, by the way. With that, again, thank the panelists and return the mic to our host, Ms. Alice Englebretsen.
Well, I just want to thank this wonderful esteemed panel for showing up tonight. I know you're all very busy people. We haven't had a meeting for a long time, so thank you for making this a really special occasion. And thank you all for being here. We have time to mingle for a little while. And if you'd like to be on the mailing list for the Sierra Club, the email list, we don't send out too many, but we have a clipboard back here on the table. So thank you all very much for coming, and maybe we'll see you at a Sierra Club event someday.
I'll come to a meeting about the modular nuclear power plant on campus sometime.
And so, thanks to Paul Mueth, this was recorded, and so, well, at least we think it was recorded.
I fell asleep at the recording wheel. I fell asleep at the wheel sometimes.
Surprised that to be here. I wasn't sure you were going to be able to.
Well, hello, how are you, man?